So there's a couple of reasons I decided to call this series Poorly Explained Comics. The main one is that I like the sound of it, but it's also handy that it functions as a preemptive waiver against expecting total accuracy. And having the flexibility to occasionally make some wrong points, either for attempted humor or simply because I have my facts wrong, felt important. See, I've been a general superhero fan for most of my life, but my comics knowledge is far from all-encompassing. And while I do try to brush up on details and occasionally research a topic from the ground up, a week is not a particularly long time when a lot of these characters go back decades, especially in a corner that I'm not already familiar with. The reason I bring this up now, 50 plus episodes in, which also, wow, where does the time go, is because my attempts to boil down Madelyne Pryor's comics history in one easily digestible couple minutes feels out of my scope. I've already mentioned that she's a clone of Jean Grey created by Mr. Sinister, the former wife and coping mechanism for Cyclops and mother of Cable, but the more details I found, the more overwhelming it all felt. Ordinarily in this instance, I'd settle for summarizing a character's most notable story, but as far as I can tell, Madelyne's biggest claim to fame is as an antagonist in the Inferno storyline of the late 80s, which I don't really feel equipped to handle this one either. Which leaves me wondering what I was thinking trying to tackle this character in the first place, and
my suggestion? Don't.
Oh, yeah, that's what. Anyways, the show must go on, and since most of my familiarity with the X-Men comes from the modern Krakoan era, I'm going to talk about Marvel's own Attack of the Clones. No, not that one. Not that one either. Boy, if I had a nickel, huh? It's Dark Web. I'm talking about Dark Web. Some important context going in. The mutants formed their own island nation, but didn't invite Madelyne. She's died and come back a couple different times at this point, her most recent resurrection reluctantly done by Krakoa. And she was given control over the demonic hell dimension known as Limbo by Illyana Rasputin, also known as Magic. At the same time, Ben Reilly, clone of Peter Parker, was going through a rough patch of his own, having been manipulated by the Beyond Corporation and losing most of his previous memories. Dubbing himself Chasm, he found his way into Limbo, and he and Madelyne embarked on a scheme against their genetic progenitors and everyone else they felt had wronged them. To that end, Madelyne creates a demonic tree that can absorb people's souls and allow others to consume its fruit to gain their knowledge. They also recruit help in the form of Ben's girlfriend Janine Godby, granted magic mask-related powers by Madelyne and going by Hallows' Eve, and Venom, whose help they initially secured by agreeing to help find his son, only to turn on him and revert his memories back to his time as a Spider-Man-hating villain. This would come back to bite them. Then they send a demon army to New York City, primarily as a diversion so they can drag Spider-Man and Jean Grey into Limbo. Ben tries to trick Peter into eating the demonic soul fruit tree in probably the stupidest part of this whole story, and that's including Wreck-Rap, the heroic demon who takes up the identity of Parker Man in admiration of Spidey, and Madelyne traps Jean Grey in a telepathic magic illusion to manipulate her into opening one of Cerebro's memory drives, only for that to devolve into a psychic slap fight once Jean sees through it. Eventually, the psychic-on-psychic violence stops when Jean agrees to give Madelyne what she was after all along, memories of the time spent raising baby Nathan before he was sent into the future. Unfortunately, when Madelyne tries to call the invasion off, Chasm doesn't react well to the perceived betrayal, and with help from Hallows' Eve, he steals a Scythe of Sorrows that symbolizes Madelyne's rule over Limbo, becoming king of the demons himself. Madelyne teams up with the X-Men, Spider-Man, and a newly recovered Eddie Brock going by the name Bedlam, as well as Wreck-Rap, and takes back control of Limbo, but rather than hand Chasm over to Krakoa or New York to face justice or, use the fact that they have two of the world's most powerful telepaths there to help him get his memories back, she decides in a weird attempt at mercy to keep him confined to Limbo's new embassy in New York. And the whole thing ends just like that. This was a silly event. So next week, it's time for things to go back to an X-Men corner I'm marginally more familiar with and get a little more sinister.